video is brought to you by Dungeon Fog. I've got some friends here on the YouTubes who are talking about their pile of shame. I'm talking to you, Ollie, Dana, Emil, Scott, Luke, Guy, Brent, Trent, Guy again. And I've got a clear message for you all. That ain't nothing compared to my digital pile of shame. And to be clear, I'm not talking about my printed pile of shame back there for you all to silently judge me. I'm talking about the incredible amount of 3D printed files I've collected from Patreons, Kickstarters, and all over, many of which I haven't even downloaded yet. And I still can't help it. But unlike physical piles of shame, there are actually ways that you can use your models before you even 3D print them. So today I'll be sharing my top secrets to using your digital STL files and renders in your online games. First, hi, I'm Danny, the 3D Printing DM, and welcome to 3D Printed Tabletop, a channel where we cover all things 3D printing for your tabletop games. And for today's episode, I've got a quick disclaimer. I'm gonna go use my models and renders in this video because they are my models and renders, and I give myself permission to use them. Even though most of the examples are for personal use, it's just a good idea to check with the designers to see if they're okay with it. Okay? Let's dive in. First, let's hit the baseline here and talk about how online tabletop games are usually played. For those who might not be familiar, most online tabletop games are played on virtual tabletops. These are apps that allow you to play D&D, Pathfinder, and other RPGs online and use things like maps and tokens to help visualize the game. These are apps or games like Roll20, Owlbear Rodeo, Foundry, Fantasy Grounds, Astral Tabletop, and for non-RPG games like Warhammer 40k or Sigmar, folks do use apps like Tabletop Simulator as well. Now, a lot of people combine these VTTs with voice and video apps like Discord to have the best of both worlds, visual reference and clear voice and video. And in a lot of these VTTs, you can write out details for your campaign, import maps, create player characters, monsters, all that jazz. At a minimum, they allow you to import maps and add tokens to represent all of the creatures. And you can usually buy and download maps, tokens, modules, basically everything you need to play. You just might need to pay a little bit more. Finally, you can usually upload your own assets, your own tokens, buildings, maps, and there are a ton of Patreons that provide these custom assets monthly. So why do we even need this video to begin with then? Because if you're like me, you've fallen in love with the 3D printable models you've collected over the weeks, months, years you've been 3D printing, and you don't have time or resin or filament to print all of them yet. Because we are eventually gonna print all of them, right? Right? Keep in mind, many designers create unique creatures which can only be found as digital sculpts. And personally, I'd prefer to have digital models, tokens, and renders rather than some of the free tokens I can find online, which, don't get me wrong, are great, but kind of like mine more. So here's how we can still use those digital models. Do you know those beautiful renders that the STL designers and Patreons use to promote their models? They make really good tokens. So for now, let's talk about the circular kind. Now, the easiest way to do this is to take one of those renders you see posted weekly in Facebook groups or on Patreons, all the places where you can usually find the high-res versions of these renders, and you're gonna use an online token generator. I really like this one on thefatefulforce.com because the borders are really nice. One caveat to these online token generators, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine, when you export the tokens, they come out at a much lower resolution than the native image you import, which isn't too bad if you're using medium and smaller sized creatures, but if you have bigger monsters that need to scale up, which I love bigger monsters, then they come out blurry and not as nice. And then, what's the point of using these beautiful renders of our favorite models if they don't look good, right? So in these cases, I do take it to Photoshop or Pixlr X, which is free and web-based. And I search for circle borders online that I like, and you see they got this nice mystical blue one, this grungy one, and look at this. This is like the official Ninja logo border. And then you crop it or mask it and you import the PNG into your VTT of choice. And look at that, a beautifully crisp, burning soul right there. Again, this is my own model here. This is my printed and painted version and is actually from our Kickstarter Uncharted Lands, which is live right now and almost over. So check it out before it ends. But still, I'd make sure the designer is cool with using their renders like this first, especially if you're sharing it with others, even for free. So that was the easiest and quickest way, the first level secret, like a small bottled water. But before moving on to the really good stuff, we gotta start somewhere. So you can push these renders even further to make them even more dramatic and memorable. And to do this, we're gonna need to pick the model out of that render and isolate it so we can add our own background to it. And here's a super simple trick to photoshopping the character out of the render within like 1 minute. Now, if you use the select and mask tool, most of the work will be done for you. And I'm dead serious. In some cases, you will have to play with it, select more areas or remove some other areas, but it usually takes less than a minute and comes nice and feathered already. So this is a Photoshop hack for me when I need to make a token or select a model in a pinch and they are clearly defined from the background like they usually aren't renders. Then we can add a dramatic background to it, maybe for a dramatic scene change or a token that feels unique. This is second level right now. We've now upgraded to a regular size water bottle. Maybe, we pour in a little flavored packet. So the thing is, that both of these techniques we've talked about so far rely on someone else's renders of your favorite models. And sometimes you just won't have that. So you gotta make your own, which isn't as hard as you might think. So this is where we really start setting the foundation for the secrets later on in the video, which will be real good ones. And I do mean that. Making your own renders is worth knowing anyways, because sometimes there's a model you just love, but the angle in the render might be bad or there's just no render available. So there's a simple way to fix this and a more involved way to fix this. The simple way is to use an app like 3D Builder. I'm not sure about the Mac equivalent, so sorry about that. So you're gonna pop the models into 3D Builder and you can disable the background or at least take off the grid. And then you can paint it, change the material, and voila. You can take a picture and use this as a token. And look at this, we got this adorable baby red dragon. Oh, it's just so cute. And sure, it's not gonna look as good as a render and say Blender, but it's much nicer than any slicer, and it's so easy. Did you catch that alliteration? Huh? Now for the more involved way to use your own renders, you can also use Blender. It's what I would suggest because it's free. You're gonna make a scene. I demand to speak with the manager. Not that kind. The kind used to make a 3D render of a model. And you can find a bunch of tutorials on how to render your 3D models in Blender from people who are much better at Blender than I am. But using Blender renders will give you many more options for how you want your models to look, and the versatility of what you can make is a huge upgrade, like that level 2 to level 3 jump. So if you're interested in a bit of digital tinkering, you're gonna have a lot of fun. Everyone, we've graduated from that water bottle to a sunny delight. Hey, have you noticed the awesome maps we've been putting our tokens on? All of these maps in this video were made in and brought to you by today's sponsor, Dungeon Fog. Dungeon Fog is more than just an incredibly customizable map making tool though. It generates dynamic text about your maps, saving you time, and you can even share those maps with the community. You guys know how I feel about community-driven things. Actually, all of the maps you've seen today were made by other users, and all it took was a single button to clone them, so I could then make it my own. You can save 10% off a premium annual subscription by using discount code 3DPT or by visiting the link in the description below. Thanks again for supporting content creator Dungeon Fog. Now, back to the video. Sometimes you really gotta scare the players. Here's where you go beyond plus ultra. You make that same render, but you turn off or disable the background when you render it out. And instead of using a circular token, you now pop in the transparent token. Now this is especially awesome with the boss fights. Believe me, this is where I love to use this. But the really nice thing about this is that you can move the camera to top-down position so you can get that top-down render, which matches top-down tokens most of the time. Or if you play isometric, like I prefer to play when I run VTT games, you can render it at different angles and have all 4 angles for your monsters, so it looks really cool. Now, I do run the standard top-down games with tokens that bird's eye view, and I still like to give the monsters a kind of old school Super Nintendo RPG vibe if I'm going to be using these full body tokens. So I angle the camera from the top, but a bit leaned forward, so there's some level of pop to it, and it almost makes it feel like it's coming at ya. It's much nicer for me than just straight top down. And we just leveled up again, folks. We are now at high C. Some of you will want to go even further, and that is by using actual models in 3D virtual tabletops like Tabletop Simulator or Tailspire. Now, this process is definitely much more involved, but of course the result is much cooler. And this is really what I think most people have in mind when they want to use their own digital models in virtual tabletops. And unfortunately, there aren't very many of this kind of 3D virtual tabletops, at least at the time of publishing this video. Your options are what I mentioned earlier, Tabletop Simulator and Tailspire. Let's talk about Tabletop Simulator first, and then we're gonna go to Tailspire. Now, learning to upload my models into Tabletop Simulator took me about 1 hour, I'd say, of following the tutorials I found, downloading everything I needed and messing up and figuring out what did and didn't work. I'm gonna go ahead and link the guides I use in the description below as well. And there are some pros and cons to this before you decide to go and buy Tabletop Simulator. Just importing the model takes a lot longer than any of the previous options. And for a quick summary of the steps, you'll have to convert the STL file into an OBJ file using a program like Blender or 3D Builder. Then you need to import into Unity, make it an asset bundle, and then upload it to the cloud and make it a custom object, and then scale it if necessary, and that is for every model you want to upload. Using imported custom digital models can still really be worth it in my opinion, especially for character models, bosses, and other models that you really need to pop and stand out on the table. So there is a reason to do it. And also, you can do this with terrain and props too, which is really nice if you want to use buildings and tools you have. Now with Tailspire, you already have a wide variety of 3D assets like we're trying to import into Tabletop Simulator, so this one doesn't really count for the Tailspire folks. Unfortunately, a lot of models come modular, and this isn't just minis, it's buildings also, especially terrain that is meant to be printed on FDM printers. So you'll need to assemble them digitally like I show here in this kit bashing video, which can then take even more time. Fortunately, there are an incredible amount of already uploaded and prepped miniatures for 5e in Tabletop Simulator. I've talked about Miguel Zavala, also known as MZ4250, before on this channel, and some community users have banded together to upload, catalog, and texture all or at least most of his 5e models. I cannot stress how nice it is to have all of the 5e specific minis in one place, not need to do all this work and have them ready to go ahead of time, allowing you to spend your time on the digital models that really get you excited, that you love. This is a huge pro for me. Now, most of your digital models won't be fully colored, and I don't mean tinted, I mean the way these Hero Forge models are colored. And I don't want to gloss over this. It is definitely going to be a deal breaker for some folks. Coloring these final models, it's not easy. It requires artistic ability and even more time commitment if you want to do this. If you were sculpting it and you had different parts and assets, different story, but it's usually not like that for us. And again, there are some exceptions, but this is mostly true. There is one example though that breaks many of these pros and cons, and even some of the lists that came before. It's Hero Forge. Now, Hero Forge has 2 subscription plans. One allows unlimited access to the token maker, and the more expensive plan, it gives 5 credits per month for STL or virtual tabletop downloads, which is a pretty good deal if you plan on using a bunch of Hero Forge models, since each of them costs $8. I actually really like the Hero Forge token maker because I can make a bunch of similarly themed NPCs really easily that look slightly different, like I did with all these temple acolytes here. And I can export them in different perspectives, and it makes it really easy to use them in basically every way I've talked about in this video here. And I can also do this with the heroes my players have, so I can keep the feel of the game pretty consistent. Now, for those of you who do play with the 3D VTTs, downloading and importing the Hero Forge files in the Tabletop Simulator is so easy, it's crazy. Didn't require any mods and full color minis, just a few clicks. It's a very different experience from uploading my own digital models. You can also import your Hero Forge models into Tailspire, but it's a bit more involved, and there's a really good step-by-step tutorial on Reddit that I'm gonna share down below. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to try and do this import with my own custom models, but these are really nice options if you want to use either of these things. It's crazy, right? So many options for using your own digital models and renders, even if you can't play in person. And if you have any of your own secrets you'd like to share, I'd love to hear them. So go ahead and leave a comment. If you enjoy the content I make and would like to support the channel, the best way to do so is to back our Kickstarter Uncharted Lands, which is live right now. And if you're watching this video when it's finished, that's okay. You can always pick up late pledges on our website too. Don't forget to check out Dungeon Fog for those awesome custom maps you'll want to place your minis on as well. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time. Happy printing and happy gaming.